December 1957. A newsroom hallway in Gansu. He Fengming is 30 years old, a reporter. She stops walking because the wall is talking to her. Papers are stuck all over the plaster, torn and jagged like clouds. Black characters are written everywhere. A party secretary reads names like he's driving nails. He Fengming. The room goes quiet. Her name leaves his mouth and lands on her life. She doesn't beg. The hallway seems to get smaller around her. What she doesn't know yet, within months, her words will become evidence. Her notebooks will become weapons against her. The people she's sent to learn from will become her judges. And the countryside she's ordered to, where fires are already roaring and metal is already screaming, will become a laboratory for the largest famine in human history. 60 million dead. Not from war, from belief. From the same certainty in that secretary's voice as he reads her name. From furnaces that turn cooking pots into dust and grain into quotas no earth can meet. She doesn't remember exactly when her name changed, only what the night felt like when it did. The newsroom smells like glue and chalk. A colleague touches her sleeve without saying anything and keeps walking. He Fengming used to believe words could make life better. Now, they hold her down like wire. By spring, she's packing a suitcase with more paper than clothes, a pair of squeaky shoes. She pins a family photo into the lining and hopes nobody searches that deep. Doors open faster for her now. Voices get quieter. Chairs scrape louder. A cadre tells her, not unkindly, "You will write confession. You will learn from the people." He talks like he's teaching her how to build a kite. She nods. That night, she copies some quotes into a pocket notebook and doesn't underline anything, because underlines can be found. Mid-1958. The Commune. The Commune doesn't feel like a building. It feels like a habit. People line up 3 times a day. Loudspeakers tell you when to eat and when to work. The backyard furnaces glow so bright the stars look jealous. Housewives carry soup ladles like medals. Brigade leaders shout, "We will surpass Britain!" And the village cheers like, "Someone just announced a wedding!" Then a notice comes down from the county. Every household has to give up metal for steelmaking. Pots, pans, nails, tools, even door hinges if necessary. People joke about the door hinges at first. The joke is funny once and sad the second time. One neighbor unscrews the iron ring from his courtyard well and leaves the rope on the ground like a dead snake. But then something gets weird. Harvest targets taped to the wall keep growing. The canteen menu goes from 2 dishes to 3 to 5 to who knows. The loudspeaker says record yields while the cook stirs thin soup in a pot big enough for a child to bathe in. Procurement teams show up with carbon paper and a truck full of ledgers, asking politely, but like it's not really a question. A cadre says, "Deliveries will prove your dedication." The canteen still smiles, but the ladle moves different now. It scrapes the bottom more often. Salt shows up, meat forgets to follow. Someone says very quietly, "I heard the granary is full," and everyone laughs too loud. Winter 1960. The line at the canteen wraps around the room. When they lift the soup pot lid, steam billows up. The soup sits thin in the bottom, more water than rice, really. She asks for half a bowl. The ladle gives her what it gives her. The heat stings her skin, thinner than it was last year. She thanks the cook anyway. A young mother stands near the back, shifting her sleeping child to her other shoulder. Without looking up, she says, "Trade?" He Fengming glances at the book in her hands, then at the child's face. A bowl for a book. The woman takes the bowl and hands over the book. She whispers to herself, "Eat slowly," and carries the warmth away with her. The commune canteen tries to act like family, but it counts like math. The loudspeakers brag about record harvests. The official numbers say all the targets are met. But something's off. The fields have stalks, sure. The bowls are still bowls. But what goes in them has changed. Between 59 and 61, whole provinces went wrong, like snow that just keeps piling up. An old man sat on a bench until he didn't. A woman in a blue jacket disappears from the end of the line, and her neighbor starts to explain, but stops mid-sentence. The real numbers pass around in whispers. 30 million, 40 million, 45 million. Nobody agrees. People live in 2 worlds at once, what the official count says and what's actually in their bowl. The backyard furnaces are supposed to make steel, but they don't. Later, engineers will call it garbage. The village just remembers the night the pots never came home. 2 stories make the rounds. One's about a canteen that serves 5 dishes for lunch, with hot water as the 4th. The other's about a village that hit its quota perfectly on paper because the pen doesn't care what the fields actually grew. Her husband, Wang Jingchao, is a reporter. He has this stubborn smile. He tells her quietly, "It'll work out. It has to." But the same week he says that, a neighbor's boy doesn't come back from the fields. Not an accident. Just gone. The family doesn't use words for it. They lock the door and don't cook for 3 days because the smell of food feels like an accusation. He Fengming learns to hear truth without breaking the people around her who still have to live here. She listens for what's real. She counts how many times the bowl clinks and figures out the difference between a real scoop and a fake one. She plants seeds behind a wall where nobody looks, feeds them with the time she saves by not fighting, and waters them with pure stubbornness. That little garden isn't a plan. It's a refusal to starve. The furnace has failed because you can't just will steel into existence. Real steel needs heat you can control, the right chemicals, oxygen that works, right? Time. A brick kiln fed with spoons gives you heat, not control. Without measuring the carbon and getting the slag out, you get a lump that looks like steel but isn't. It bends when it should hold. It cracks when it should last. Bad promises break, just like bad steel. By 62, the posters change. Nobody says sorry. The loudspeakers start saying numbers that actually match what's in the bowls. People get their own little plots back. A diesel pump at the field edge coughs to life and keeps coughing until it sounds like music. One neighbor mutters, "Cash instead of coupons," and hands a vendor some money like he's passing along something precious. The canteen line stays, but it's not some grand thing anymore. People bring home a wok, grow some greens in a corner, keep a little rice for when someone gets sick. She asks herself, "Where are we now?" And answers, "We're past the promises." That's the first kind of sentence she actually believes in. She holds on to certain phrases like Lucky Charms, eat without paying because it hurts to remember, surpass Britain because it shows how big a lie can be, eat slowly because she taught herself that and it saved her, working metal because the pump turned noise into water. Most of those backyard furnaces made nothing worth having. Most people she knows learned to live on less than the loudspeakers promised. You could fit the death count into one sentence, but she won't do it. When a pump works, that's better than any speech. The names come off the walls slower than they went up. Silence can be kind or cruel, and she uses it for both. One night in 62, she stands in a field and listens. The pump coughs, coughs again, then settles into a smooth rhythm. She cups her hands and breathes into them. It's not winning. It's something better, something that actually works. On the 2nd of March, 1969, Senior Lieutenant Ivan Strelnikov led his men onto Zhenbao Island, a gray patch of land sitting in the Ussuri River like a fist pushing into ice. Strelnikov believed in checklists because they kept people alive. He called out the order, 2 meters between each man. Spread them out enough, and you didn't have a line of soldiers anymore. You had a series of separate targets scattered across the frozen surface. The radio operator checked his handset. A corporal coughed into his scarf, thinking about tea. Across the water, willow trees threw long shadows, and somewhere behind them, the Chinese had dug in. They'd cleared their sight lines and waited. The shots came without warning. They hit the ice so hard the sound arrived after the impact. Strelnikov went down. For a moment, nothing. Then someone yelled down, and the whole patrol collapsed onto the frozen ground. Snow blew sideways. The radio operator keyed the handset. Contact front, under fire, short form. Seconds mattered. There was nowhere to hide except the frozen earth itself, and it didn't care what happened on top of it. Yuri Babansky, a junior sergeant with a stubborn jaw, crawled over to Strelnikov. The lieutenant was heavy in that way that meant he was gone. To the left, Chinese soldiers were moving closer, disciplined, patient. Behind the willows sat more men and more guns. Babansky looked left, right, and at the empty horizon. Leadership had just died, and he was the only one standing. "I'm taking command," he said, first to the men around him, then to the radio. Not because the radio needed to hear it, but because saying it out loud made everything feel less like it was falling apart. Now he had to make a choice. Leave bodies on the ice, risk more men trying to get them back, or find another way. He picked the second one. "Hold fire, retrieve Strelnikov," he ordered. 2 men started crawling. The ice sounded like a warning underneath them. Spreading men out across ice meant spreading the risk. The radio stayed quiet because sound carried farther than bullets in cold air. But spacing didn't matter anymore. The first man down destroyed any comfort that tactic had given them. Grief didn't respect intervals. They dragged Strelnikov by his coat collar, the strongest seam they could grab. Rifle shots cracked across the wind. A bullet ripped through Babansky's sleeve and didn't even slow down. Someone asked about smoke, and he said no. The wind here would turn any smoke into a flag. "Slow and low," he said. Minutes blurred together. They got Strelnikov across the line, they'd drawn with their breath and made him a point on their side of the map, at least for now. Babansky wanted to rest, wanted to close his eyes for 3 seconds. He didn't. Back, he said, and the men moved again. The other side wasn't panicking. The fire was patient and controlled. A machine gun fired in steady bursts like a metronome. These weren't amateurs. They were here to make a point, and they had the numbers to do it. Less than a dozen men against dozens across the channel. Minutes of fighting that felt like hours because time stopped working, right? Every meter they crossed felt like a mile. Babansky kept thinking the same thing. This is where ally becomes enemy. By mid-morning, backup finally got through. Backup didn't mean rest. It meant more men trading time for ground. The radio crackled, and a voice came through, Bubinin. The name arrived like a tool he didn't even know he needed. Vitaly Bubinin shows up, and things get organized. He's direct, adaptable, a senior lieutenant who actually solves problems. He watches the frozen field like a mechanic studying an engine, looking for pressure points, weak spots, timing issues. The ice itself is failing, even though it shouldn't be able to. He tells his squad, keep moving. His team pushes across ice that's buckled like a giant. Stepped on it. Guys are slipping everywhere, firing their rifles in quick, controlled pairs. The wind just takes your heat and gives nothing back. He stays on the radio, says only what matters. Orders come as hand signals and head nods. That's what real competence looks like. A machine gun is set up in some willows, controlling an oval patch of ice. You counter it the same way, your own short, precise bursts that force that barrel to shift. On ice, this open tracer rounds tell you what's happening in your gut. Bubinin reads and writes that story simultaneously. A guy next to him starts to rise too high, and Bubinin's glove pushes him back down. The shot meant for his shoulder whistles through nothing instead. Then he gets hit. Wire through his ribs, left humming there. He says, I'm fine, and keeps pushing forward. You stop moving and you're done. You keep moving and you're still in the fight. The corporal near him picks it up, repeating, keep moving, like he just found religion. Vladimir Orikov is on the other side of the ice, already wounded once. Half his hand won't respond. He's a junior sergeant who treats pain like gossip, not worth listening to. The enemy nest ahead is so loud, it physically pushes on your chest. He turns to the guy next to him and says, I've got this, calm as anything, because calm spreads like a virus. He leans into his gun, finds a rhythm that makes the other gun have to think about staying alive. He shifts 2 steps sideways, which ruins their math, but the ice doesn't care about math, it just collects its debts. Another wound finds him, 20 meters of ground, then 8, then 3, minutes that feel like seconds, then seconds that feel like hours. Small numbers of casualties, all of them with names. The medals will come later. A hero star typed up neat on an official form. But right now, heroism just means not leaving someone out there alone. Orikov says, not yet, wait, because timing is everything. He hears the pause when a gun position has to choose between living and firing. His answer comes first. The nest goes quiet for 1 second, just one, that's somehow too long. In that single second, 3 men cover ground that wouldn't impress a map, but keeps them breathing. By afternoon on the 15th, the whole situation changes. You hear it before you see it, tracks, metal moving through the air like a prediction. Silhouettes on flat ice are like theater, everything visible. Guys taste metal in their mouths. Bubinin says, eyes up, which means watch but stay down. He knows what a tank means. It's not a miracle, it's a problem, and problems have solutions if you break them into steps. Do you rush that exposed ground to kill the nest before armor makes it worthless? Or do you wait and let things lock down? Bubinin says, now. They go. It's rough. It's necessary. The gun goes silent. Orikov doesn't get up. 2 big fights, one on March 2nd, one on the 15th, mark the whole months of this border tension. Guys from these days will wear the same medal. On the Chinese side, 2 soldiers get named combat heroes too. The numbers say it all. But there's another number that matters to just one family. The time a telegram arrives. Someone says, survival comes from inches, not speeches. You carry that in your pocket next to your smokes. The ice goes dark. The day was endless and instant at the same time. You can hear your own heartbeat. Somewhere out there, a team is loading an RPG. Another team is checking a tank's systems. Both sides know what they're doing. Nobody can afford to be sloppy anymore. The river freezes gray in the evening. Everything looks like a pencil sketch. All graphite and shadow. That's where Hua Yujie stands, a PLA RPG gunner, with Yu Haichong beside him. They're young, but their hands don't shake. A tank engine growls across the ice, slow and heavy. It turns into the wind like it's reading a map. Hua keeps his voice down. We're ready. Yu checks the site and nods. They step forward, just 2 steps on ice, but that means 1,000 tiny adjustments. The ice cracks under their weight, then settles back. Here's the thing about RPGs. They don't care how thick the armor is. What matters is the angle, the distance, and catching the crew when they're not paying attention. But ice changes everything. Your feet won't stay put, recoil works different. The tank's front armor is built to lie, but the sides tell the truth. The tracks are honest. The exhaust gives away the location, and RPG team survives by knowing which truths they can use in the next 3 seconds. Hua says, now. The backblast hits like a slap, the warhead flies, and the tank convulses, becomes something broken. Smoke rolls across the dark. The crew moves fast inside their machine, but the machine isn't listening anymore. A second shot gets loaded and held ready. The T-62 becomes a problem. Straps creak as they drag it. Metal fights gravity and loses. Someone yells pull, and the broken tank moves across the ice, like some reluctant king being dragged to court. The ice groans, sounds like old men telling old stories. A machine built to win arguments just becomes an argument on a frozen river. On both sides, the only language that works is knowing what you're doing. The tank crew keeps trying. The RPG team keeps moving, watching, reloading, shifting. It's physics and nerve, figuring out which one you've got more of in the next minute. It's the late 70s in a small town that smells like wet dirt and machine oil. There's a diesel pump sitting out at the edge of a field, just waiting. A man in a gray jacket keeps pulling the starter, burning his palm, until finally the engine coughs to life. It catches and holds. That sound rolls across the fields and echoes off the kitchen windows all through town. People hear it and nod, the way you nod when a clock is keeping good time. Down by the canal, a boy throws a rock and watches it sink into water that never stops moving. He Fengming standing in line at the market. Her hair has seen some years. She's counting out bills in her hand. Rice. About 2 pounds. The vendor weighs it out. She pays. The woman behind her mutters something about cash instead of coupons. He Fengming breathes in the steam coming off the sack and remembers thin soups that were more hot than filling, but she doesn't say that part out loud. At home, a wok hits the stove with a crash. Oil spreads across the metal, and then garlic goes in. The kitchen fills with smell. A ladle taps the rim, clean and clear. She stirs slow because rice needs patience with heat. She sets down a bowl that's full, honestly full, not stingy but not wasteful either. Before she eats, she closes her eyes the way people do when they're about to say something important. The bowl is good. In a Beijing museum, a T-62 tank sits on polished floors. The sign says, one word, captured. People walk by, some read it, some don't, some take pictures. A veteran with careful steps stops for a long time. He looks at that word, nods once, like he's closing a book. 1 machine, 2 wars that changed how neighbors saw each other. Deaths that fill entire pages. A few names with families who remember exact dates. Inches that meant living or dying, inches that turned into museum pieces. A whole century learning to speak quieter than it started. Bills paid instead of promises made. Machines that break and get fixed like any machine. Bowls that are full because someone worked and someone paid. The border stays. The river freezes, thaws, freezes again, like it always has, before anyone called it history. The beginning said, eat for nothing. The end says, pay and eat. The beginning melted the pots. The end keeps the stove burning and the pump running. The beginning believed in routine like armor. The end reads a small placard and knows that history can sit on a floor and be pointed at by kids walking past. He Fengming eats. Somewhere, a pump ticks. Somewhere else, a tank sits and waits.